Now let's go on with explain neuromuscular junction. Okay. Sekejap, Okay. Okay, alright. Okay, so our LO now, finish with cocaine addiction. Now our LO is to briefly explain neuromuscular junction. Okay, neuromuscular junction. So you can see what is neuromuscular junction means here. So nama dia neuromuscular. So meaning that it's a junction between neuron and muscle. Okay, kita dah belajar synapse kan. So synapse can be neuron with neuron, gap or junction between neuron to neuron, or it can be neuron to muscle, or it can be neuron to glands. Okay, so in this particular subtopic, kita akan pergi the junction or the synapse between neuron and muscle. Okay, so kita nak belajar how our muscle can contract and relax in the stimulation of nervous system. Okay, right. Okay, neuromuscular junction. Okay, so neuromuscular junction is the junction between or the synapse of motor neuron. Okay, this is motor neuron, right? And forming synapse with skeletal muscle. So this is the skeletal muscle. Okay, sebelum Madam proceed, sekarang ni Madam nak tanya satu soalan kat you all. Motor neuron. So motor neuron is, remember our organization of nervous system. So motor neuron ni duduk dekat branches yang mana? Central nervous system or peripheral nervous system?
Peripheral.
Yes, peripheral nervous system. Okay, good. So dalam peripheral nervous system, dia ada dua branches, afferent, efferent. So motor neuron is located with in each branch. In which branch? Afferent, efferent.
Efferent.
Okay, kenapa you cakap efferent?
Because muscle is effector.
Yes, okay, very good. So it is under the branch of efferent pathway. Alright, kenapa? Because remember, efferent is going toward our effector, and one of the effector is muscle. Right? So ingat motor neuron is branches of peripheral nervous system and under sub branch of efferent pathway. Okay, so this motor neuron. Okay, so the presynaptic membrane is the neuron motor, which is this one. So this is our presynaptic membrane. Okay, where it releases acetylcholine. So acetylcholine is one of the neurotransmitter, another type of neurotransmitter. So kita dah belajar dopamine, kita dah belajar acetylcholine. So ada dua jenis neurotransmitter yang kita dah belajar. Okay, right. So the presynaptic membrane, which is a neuron motor, release neurotransmitter acetylcholine to the postsynaptic membrane. So the postsynaptic membrane is our skeletal muscle. Alright, so what happened? You can see acetylcholine binds to the receptor, right? Which is ligand-gated ion channel. So jangan tanya lagi apa itu ligand-gated ion channel sebab kita dah sentuh sebelum ni. It's a kind of gated channel. Kenapa dia ada receptor? So what happened? The neurotransmitter will bind to the receptor on the ligand-gated ion channel and change permeability of the membrane towards certain ions. So kalau dia mengalami EPSB, the membrane will be permeable towards sodium ion. So sodium ion will diffuse into the membrane. Okay, right. So apa tadi cakap? Okay, so the acetylcholine bind to the receptor on the postsynaptic membrane, which is at the muscle, right? And the binding of acetylcholine cause EPSB, like I said. So remember, bila cause EPSB, it makes the membrane permeable toward sodium ion. So what happens? Sodium inside this area, inside the cleft, okay, ni, inside the cleft, synaptic cleft will be will be diffused into the membrane. So the channel will be permeable towards the sodium ion. So sodium ion will influx, alright, diffuse in and makes inside of the membrane become positive. As such, depolarizing the postsynaptic membrane, which is the muscle. Okay, right. The muscle membrane. So what happened once the acetylcholine has acted or binding to the receptor? What happened to acetylcholine? Will it stays longer inside the cleft, synaptic cleft? No. So acetylcholine will be terminated by enzymatic activities, which is by the action of acetylcholinesterase enzyme. So acetylcholinesterase enzyme will break down acetylcholine to acetate and choline. So this is, remember, there are two ways on how neurotransmitter is removed or breakdown. Okay, salah satu cara dia is by enzymatic action. So for acetylcholine, it is going to be breakdown by acetylcholinesterase enzyme into acetate and also choline. Okay, right. So two. And you can see this is what we call as the motor neuron, which synapse to the muscle fiber. So ini kita punya muscle cell. Okay, right. So detail kita akan belajar kejap lagi. Okay. Okay, human skeletal muscle. Okay, right. So let's start with the description of organization for the skeletal muscle. I'm not going to touch this one in detail sebab ni video ni Madam ada buat. 2 video lepas ni Madam buat. So nanti you tengok semula. I just go through slightly. Okay. Right, describe the organization of skeletal muscle. Macam mana structure muscle kita. Okay, so this is our skeletal muscle structure. Right, so this is our bundle of muscle. Okay, so ni muscle kita. And it is connected to the bone here by tendon kat sini. Okay, so a skeletal muscle consists of bundle of long fibers. So this is what we call as bundle of long fibers. Ni, satu bundle ni. Right, of long fiber, we call it as fascicle. Right. And then, right, so within each one bundle ni, or one fascicle ni, there are another bundles of fiber. So one of these bundle kita panggil one muscle fiber. So this is one muscle fiber. Ni. Okay, so ni satu muscle fiber, this is satu muscle fiber, this is another muscle fiber, this is another muscle fiber. And each muscle fiber, so this is skeletal muscle, kita dah belajar characteristic of skeletal muscle. It is multinucleated. It is made of long cylindrical cell. It has striation. Kita dah belajar dah, right? So this is one muscle fiber that has multiple nuclei. So within one muscle fiber, all right, so it is made of a bundle of smaller myofibril. So this is one muscle fiber. Kalau kita tengok dalam dia, kita buka ada punya membrane, alright, dalam tu ada lagi bundle of smaller myofibrils. So this is myofibrils. Okay, alright. So what you will have inside the myofibril ni, apa benda pula ni yang lagi kecil ni? So the myofibril composed of two kinds of myofilaments. So this is myofibrils, and dalam ni composed of myofilaments. Okay, which is the thick filament and the thin filament. Okay, thick and thin filament. Right. Okay. So macam mana nak bayangkan keadaan muscle kita ni? You just bayangkan satu wire. Okay, wire besar, alright. So wire besar tu fascicle. So kita gunting, kan ada orang gunting wire tu, macam gunting dia punya luar tu. Okay, kita buka dalam tu, you nampak lagi another bundle of muscle. So itu ialah kita punya muscle fiber. Yang ada wire warna merah, wire warna biru, wire warna coklat ke. Okay, so that is one single muscle fiber. So kita buka, kita gunting pula yang wire, setiap wire tu, wire merah tu, kita buang kulit dia. Dalam tu kita nampak macam ada bundle of copper wire tu kan. Okay, so that is myofibrils. And kalau kita cuba kopek pula, buka pula, pulas, pintar dia tu, kita buka lagi, kita nampak very fine fiber. So that is as if like the myofilament. So that's how our muscle looks like. Okay, right. Okay, so nanti tolong tengok, okay, this one this is the myofibrils. Okay. So this is ni muscle fiber, laju sangat. Okay, nanti slow-slow lah tengok ya. Okay, right. So this is our muscles. Okay, I'm not going to touch this one in detail. Nanti tengok balik video. Okay, so tadi ingat tak? The myofibrils are composed of two kinds of myofilaments. The thick filament and the thin filament. Okay, so the thin filament first. Okay, how the thin filament looks like? So the thin filament consists of two strands of actin subunit. So actin subunit here refers to proteins. It is made of protein. Our muscle is a protein. So it made of protein. So the thin filament is made of actin subunit. So this is actin subunit. Ni nampak ni tulisan dia kat sini. Yang bulat-bulat macam manik-manik ni, ni actin subunit. So this actin subunit twisted. You can see the structure is twisted into alpha helix. And they have two regulatory proteins. So ada dua protein pengawal atur di situ, which are troponin and tropomyosin. Which one is troponin? Troponin is the purple color here. This is troponin. Okay, and tropomyosin is this one, like a rope-like structure. Okay, and they have their own function, so which we are going to detail out later. Okay, as for thick filament, you can see the thick filament consists of myosin molecule. So this is myosin molecule, which also proteins make up of globular heads structure there. It has globular heads and cylindrical tail. Okay, right. All right. As for the detailed structure and function of actin and the thin filament and the thick filament. So remember, the thin filament is made of actin subunit and the thick filament is made of myosin subunit, right? And remember, what is the shape of actin just now? It is sphere shape. Okay, ni bentuk ni, sphere shape. Whereby for myosin, it is having a shape of globular head and also cylindrical tail. Right? Okay. So yang lain nanti you baca, yang bawah ni je dia nak touch. What is the function of the actin subunit? Right? What is the function of the thin filament? So here, the thin filament function for forming cross bridge. Okay, what does that mean by cross bridge? As if like macam membuat satu jambatan. Okay, membentuk satu jambatan with myosin. Okay, I will touch this later. And what about the function of myosin? Myosin helps to hydrolyze ATP. Hydrolyze here means breakdown. Okay, untuk memecahkan molekul ATP. Okay, and then it become the center of bioenergetic reaction that will power the muscle contraction. So it will assist the process of muscle contraction. Okay, right. Nanti tengok video. Okay, next one. Also, I made this video, right? So we go to the. Okay, so far are you okay? Am I too fast?
Yes, madam.
Am I too fast or it just okay?
No, madam. Okay, sir.
Okay, all right. Okay, now let's go to description of structure of sarcomere. So what is sarcomere? Okay, you can see from this animation. All right. So this is our myofibril. This is one myofibril. So dalam myofibril ni kita ada myofilaments, okay, the thin filaments and the thick filament. Okay, and you can see that this is what we call as sarcomere unit. Okay, nampak macam z line ni dengan z line ni. So this is a border of one sarcomere. So what is the function or what can we found inside sarcomere? But before that, Medan nak you perhati betul-betul animation ni. Cuba tengok apa perubahan yang you nampak among the space that you can see here. Nampak ni? When the muscle is contracting, tengok kejap Okay, relax. When the muscle is contracting, this region is shrinking. Ni, kawasan ni shrinking. Nampak? This area and this area, shrinking. Similarly to this area dekat tengah-tengah ni, shrinking. So this is what happen when the muscle is contracting. Okay, tengok betul-betul balik. Right, this area and this area, shrinking. Okay, dengan yang ini. Nampak tak? It shrinks. See? Nampak tak? Nampak tak? Nampak tak?
Nampak, madam.
Okay, so this is what we are going to discuss after this. Okay, what happened to the sarcomere as our muscle contract. But before that, you have to know what are the component of the sarcomere itself. Okay, all right. So what is sarcomere? Okay, sarcomere is the basic contractile unit of the skeletal muscle. So bahagian yang paling basic which involved in the muscle contraction. Okay. And they are divided into few bands and line. Okay, right. So the first one is the Z line. What is Z line means? Z line is the border of sarcomere. Remember I said just now, yang garisan yang Z dengan Z. So that is the border. Okay, so itu kita panggil Z line. So Z line is a border of a sarcomere. Pembahagi kepada satu-satu sarcomere dengan sarcomere yang lain. Okay. Second one is I-band. Okay, I-band composed of only thin filaments. Okay, A-band. A-band is the broad region that correspond to the length of thick filament. And last one is H-zone. H-zone is the center of the A-band. Okay, all right. So let's start. Okay, so Z-line. Okay, this is the structure of one sarcomere. Yeah, this is one sarcomere. So this border line and this border line we call as the Z line. So this Z line, one Z line to another Z line, kita panggil border of one sarcomere. So if we look at this picture yang bawah ni, right? So hujung ni dengan hujung ni is the Z line, right? Okay. Okay, next one. I-band. I-band is the area that composed of only thin filament. I-band ialah kawasan yang hanya dipenuhi ataupun diduduki or occupied by only thin filament. No overlapping. Kawasan yang tak ada overlap. Thin and thick filament, no overlapping. Kawasan tu hanya ada sepenuhnya of I-band. Remember what is I-band? The area that composed of only thin filament. Okay, let's see. Okay, this is yang ni Yang warna biru ni thin filament, yang warna merah ni thick filament. So tadi I-band ialah kawasan or composed that area that is composed only by the thin filament sahaja. So which area is that? So ini, kawasan ni. Maksudnya kawasan ni yang tak ada overlapping. Okay, ni kawasan ni. Daripada sini sampai sini. Nampak tak? Kawasan ini adalah kawasan yang tiada overlapping dengan thick filament. So, daripada sini sampai sini. Okay, so this is the I-band. Similar to this area. Okay, right? Alright, nampak tak? Faham Okay, that is I-band. Next, A-band. A-band is the broad region that correspond to the length. Kawasan yang seolah-olah mewakili panjang keseluruhan of the thick filament. So which area is that? Okay, so it's from here, ni daripada sini sampai sini. So it is area that correspond to the length. So from here, nampak dia macam sama ni, kita macam mewakili. Okay, so from here to here. So this is the A-band. Can you get that? Okay.
Yes, madam.
Okay,
Dapat,
right.
madam.
Okay, good. Next, H zone. So what is H zone? H zone is the center of A-band. Center of A-band. So which area is that? So remember, A-band yang ni correspond to the length of the thick filament, and H zone is the center of A-band. Okay, center. So ni kawasan ni. Ni kawasan ni. So maksudnya daripada sini sampai sini. Center. Okay. So kalau kita buat lukisan dia dekat sini. So this is the H zone. Okay. Alright. Boleh Okay. So now to test you again. I guess dalam buku you ada gambar ni. Okay. So ni lagi satu kali Right, so remember this is the one sarcomere. So ni daripada sini sampai sini. Right, is the Z line, right? So Z line is the border of sarcomere. So you have one sarcomere here, you have another sarcomere here. Sini dengan sini another sarcomere. Okay, so this is our Z line. Okay, this is gambar masa kita under electron microscope. Okay, transmission electron microscope. So if kita refer to gambar yang lukisan bawah ni pula sama. So this is the Z line. Okay. So which one is I-band? Which one is I-band? So ingat I-band is correspond to the area composed of only by thin filament. So mana area tu? So ini. Kawasan ni. Okay, yang tepi-tepi ni. Only composed by the thin filament. So for this one, mana gambar dia? So yang ini. Yang gambar cerah sikit ni is the kawasan yang cerah ni is the I-band. Okay, so kalau yang kat sini yang mana satu? It's here. Warna yellow tu is the thin filament. Yang warna purple tu is the thick filament. Okay, and which one is the A-band? So A-band correspond to the length of the thick filament. So which one is that? So yang inilah, yang mana gelap ni. So here, from here to here. So this is the A-band. You kena conteng buku you penting tahu ni. Okay, A-band. Okay, and which one is the H zone? H zone is the center of A-band. So mana dia? Yang ini. Ni kawasan ni. Alright. Ni. Okay, and this one. Kawasan tu. So that is H zone. So what is M line? M is middle line. So itulah garisan tengah je lah. Garisan tengah macam ni. Okay, right. Boleh? Boleh?
Boleh, madam.
Boleh, madam.
Okay, alright. So try out this one. Yang ni faham Kalau ini maksudnya you kena tengok garisan ni juga. Okay, so ini ialah Z line. Okay, so which one is your Z line? So ikut titik ni. So this is your Z line. Right, so this is the Z line. Okay, so which one is the I band? So ni kan I band kan? Ni I band, right? Okay, ni kawasan I band. Okay, so bila kita nak tengok gambar yang atas ni mana satu I band punya area. So yang inilah area dia. Macam tu cara nak buat dia. Faham Okay, ataupun you lorek ke nak color ke, up to you. Okay, right. So which one is H zone? So H zone daripada sini kan? Daripada sini sampai sini H zone. Okay, so mana satu H zone kita kat sini? So yang ni, yang warna light grey ni. So this is H zone. Okay, right. So that is sarcomere. Okay, so any questions so far? Any questions so far? No. Okay, no. Let's go to the mechanism of sliding filament model. Okay, explain mechanism. Now we are going to mechanism of muscle contraction according to sliding filament model. So kita akan pergi tengok what is the how muscle contract according to one mechanism. So remember there are few what we call it, not mechanism, there are few factors or component that related to muscle contraction. The first one is the fiber itself. Okay, so this is the first one yang kita akan touch, which is the sliding filament model. Okay, you dah belajar dah ni masa sekolah. Okay, right. I guess you dah belajar and you might have the basic process. Okay, sliding filament model of muscle contraction. Okay, according to the sliding filament model of muscle contraction, neither the thin nor the thick filament change in the length when the sarcomere shorten. Maksudnya, remember sarcomere kita apa? One Z line to another Z line. So this is our sarcomere. So dia kata when the sarcomere shorten, there is no changes in terms of the length of the thin filament or the thick filament. Maksudnya, in terms of panjang, the filament tak akan berubah. But what happen instead is the filament slide past each other longitudinally, producing more overlapping between the thick and the thin filaments. So what happened during the muscle contraction, the filaments, okay, bayangkan jari madam ni, one is thin filament, one is thick filament. So what happened when the muscle contract, so the filaments are basically sliding each other, sliding. Nampak They slide. So the more you slides, right, you can see your sarcomere. Bayangkan sarcomere memang satu, pergelangan tangan madam ni sarcomere. Okay, so when the sarcomere shorten, you can see jari tak berubah pun, pendek. Right, so meaning that the thin and the thick filament are not having any change in terms of the length, but what happened, they are overlapping. Okay, they are overlapping each other. So this is what happened during muscle contraction. So as result, both region occupied by only the thin filament, which is the I band, and the region occupied only by the thick filament, which is the H zone, shrinks. Okay, and then this sliding is based on the interaction between the actin and myosin filament. So meaning that when our muscle contract, the I band and the H zone will shrinks. Okay, right. So let's see. Okay, let's see first. Kita tengok balik gambar yang ni. Okay, look at here. This is your sarcomere. You can see the sarcomere shorten. Sarcomere tu nampak memendek. Tapi what happened? In terms of length, the thick and the thin filament, there is no change in terms of length. But you can see what happened to the I band and look at the H zone as the sarcomere shorten. Nampak? They become shrinks. Okay? I band and H zone shrinks. Okay. Faham So what happened is that the filaments, the thin filament and the thick filament is overlapping, sliding past each other. and become more overlap. Okay, right. Nampak Faham tak?
Faham, madam.
Okay, right. Okay, now let's see the mechanism. Okay, so do you have the picture inside your textbook? Picture of the mechanism? Gambar ni. Ada tak? Dalam textbook ke, dalam modul ke? Dalam modul ada?
Dalam textbook, madam.
Oh, dalam modul tak ada ya? Okay, so you have to get this picture.
Dalam modul tak ada.
Okay. So kena cari gambar ni, nanti tempik lah apa benda ke, buat gambar ni penting. Okay. So I'm going to explain to you one by one and then we go to picture. Okay. So the first one, mechanism of muscle contraction using filament, sliding filament model. Okay. According to this filament model, so what happened first is the myosin head is bound to ATP, right? And it is at its low energy configuration. Okay, myosin head. Remember, myosin tu macam mana rupa dia yang bentuk macam kepala naga tu. And then yang ekor dia pintal-pintal tu. So that is myosin. So when the myosin head, yang kepala dia tu bounds to ATP, right? It is at its low energy configuration. Low energy configuration means dia macam tak ada tenaga lah. So nak bayangkan macam mana nak fahamkan you all ni, madam fikir macam ni. You bayangkan dalam atas kepala myosin tu ada ATP. ATP tu berat. Berat sebab dia ada 3-phosphate. So berat. So bila berat, kepala dia akan turun ke bawah. So low energy configuration. Okay, like this. This one. Okay. So yang ingat yang bulat-bulat ni thin filament. So yang ni is our thick filament. Myosin head, the cylindrical tail. So ni. So when the myosin head is bound to ATP, so it is at its low energy configuration. Okay, so dia macam tunduk macam gitulah. So kepala dia berat. Okay, bayangkan macam tu Jangan you tulis dalam exam kan kepala dia berat. Benda tu semua jangan. Okay, next. What happened? Remember the function of myosin. Myosin helps to hydrolyze ATP. So what happened? Myosin head hydrolyze ATP, memecahkan molekul ATP into ADP and inorganic phosphate. Ni, phosphate. Right? So at this point, it is at high energy configuration. So the myosin head itself tadi, pecahkan molekul ATP. So dia akan jadi, pecah here means hydrolyze, hydrolyze ATP into ADP and phosphate. So dia dah jadi ringan. Okay, bila satu batu besar dah pecah dua, so ringan. So bila ringan, kepala dia akan naik. Macam itulah. Okay, so tengok gambar ni. Okay, nampak tak beza kepala dia? Masa ni dengan masa ni. Okay, so what happened tadi? Myosin head hydrolyze ATP to form ADP and phosphate. Now it is at high energy configuration. So dia dah macam, I am ready. Macam tu dia kata. Okay, right. Next, what happened? Okay, what happened to the myosin head as it is at high energy configuration? Myosin head binds to actin protein, forming cross bridge, all right, with the thin filament. So myosin head binds to the actin filament, forming cross bridge. Okay, apa jadi? Okay, you can see. Nampak tadi? Right? So the myosin head tadi ni forming cross bridge, bind to the actin protein and forming a cross bridge. Bayangkan tangan madam ni actin protein. Ni tadi. Ini yang penumbuk ni ialah myosin head. Okay. When myosin head tadi bounds to ATP, can you see my hands? Okay. Okay. So when the myosin head is bound to ATP, so it is at low energy configuration. So when the myosin head hydrolyze ATP to ADP and phosphate, dia naik kepala dia macam ni. Alright? So it is at its high energy configuration. So next, what happened to the myosin head? Myosin head bound to actin protein, alright, or bound to the thin filament and forming cross bridge. So this is what we call as cross bridge, right? When the myosin head bounds to the actin protein or actin subunit, then it forming the cross bridge. Okay, right. So next, what happened? Okay, the myosin couple release of ADP and phosphate, inorganic phosphate, to forming ataupun to form a power stroke. So ayat ni bermaksud myosin couples release. Couple release mean dia lepaskan dua-dua secara serentak. Dia lepaskan both ADP and phosphate to form a power stroke. What does that mean by power stroke? Power stroke means, tadi ingat dia dah melekat macam ni kan? Power stroke means dia tarik. Okay, ini power stroke kita panggil. Dia tolak myosin filament to the center of sarcomere. Okay, right. And then what happened? The sliding of thin filament along the myosin. So that's why when the muscle contract, you akan nampak dia macam ke tengah. Tadi kan kita tengok animation yang tadi tu, when the sarcomere shorten, dia akan ke arah macam ni, tengah. Right, so kenapa jadi macam tu? Because tadi myosin head bounds to actin protein, actin subunit forming cross bridge, and then it release both ADP and phosphate. Okay, coupled release of ADP and phosphate, and then to form power stroke. Power stroke here mean macam ni. Okay, dia nak tarik ke tengah, going to the center. So muscle akan macam ni. Macam tu. Okay, right. Okay, Mila tak tahu lagi boleh bayang ke tak apa yang Mila bayang tu. Nampak ke tak apa yang Mila nampak tu. Okay, right. Okay, so this tadi jadi So forming cross bridge. And then what happened? Ni, the myosin head coupled the release of ADP and phosphate to form power stroke. You can see, nampak beza bentuk dia. So dia macam tarik, as if like macam ni. Tarik. Okay, right. And then what happened? The thin filament is moved towards the center of sarcomere. Okay, so your muscle will contract. Okay. Next, what happened? Okay, so ni tadi the sliding of thin filament along the myosin toward the center of sarcomere. Okay, next what happened? The return of the myosin head to the low energy configuration. So tadi bila dah power stroke macam tu, so the myosin head return to its lower energy configuration by binding of new molecule of ATP. So releases the myosin head from actin. So bila dah power stroke macam ni tadi, new ATP bind to the head, myosin head, and what happen? Remember, bila kepala tu ada ATP, so dia terus jadi macam berat. So myosin head then releases from the actin and the cycle continues. So the cycle continues. Okay, right. Tengok, tengok gambar ni semula ya. Okay, ni tadi myosin head, alright. Ni forming power stroke. It pulls the thin filament towards the center of sarcomere, and then you can see now new ATP bind to the myosin head, and now the myosin head return to low energy configuration, and the cycle continues. Okay, one more thing. As death occur, so bila berlaku kematian, cell cannot longer produce ATP. So as such, the cross bridges intact. So it will cause muscle stiffness that known as rigor mortis. Okay, maksud dia apa kat sini? Remember that kita dah tengok banyak cerita ke, pengalaman sendiri ke, bila seseorang tu meninggal dunia, kita kena cepat-cepat kan buat apa yang patut. Luruskan tangan ke, luruskan kaki ke, kiamkan tangan cepat-cepat ke, sebab lepas tu dia dah susah nak digerakkan. Okay, kenapa? As death occur, cell will no longer produce ATP. ATP will be depleted. So remember, bila ATP tak ada, right, cross bridge will be intact. Cross bridge means the myosin head still attached to the actin protein. So dia akan macam ni je. So what happen? It will cause muscle stiffness. Muscle akan jadi kaku ataupun kejung ke, keras ke, kan? Alright. Sebab apa? When we have ATP, bila ada ATP, ATP will bind to the myosin head and then cause the myosin head to go back ataupun return to the low energy configuration. But now without ATP, the myosin head still bind to the actin subunit or actin protein. Okay, so this is what we call as cross bridge still intact. Cross bridge masih kekal dalam keadaan begini and cause muscle stiffness. So this is what we call as rigor mortis. Okay, right. Okay, any question for the first mechanism? Any question? Shakira?
No, madam.
No. Okay. Yang lain, faham tak betul-betul ni?
Faham, madam.
Faham
Faham, madam. Faham.
Okay.
Faham, madam.
Okay, harap betul-betul lah faham you all. Okay. And then you have to support. Nanti tengok dekat YouTube, okay? Ada video yang pendek-pendek je, 2 minit, 4 minit untuk to show you the sliding filament model, okay? Alright. Okay, so ni kita dah discuss. Okay, so what happened when the muscle contract tadi? So as conclusion, what will happen? So as our muscle contract, the changes on the sarcomere is that the H zone and the I band during the muscle contraction, right? What will happen? The sarcomere will shorten, the I band will shrink, the H zone will also shrink. So this is the changes that will occur. So let's see this picture. Tengok ni, this is when the muscle is relaxed. Yeah, muscle will in relaxation state. This one is the contracting muscle, muscle yang sedang contract. This one is fully contracted muscle. Okay, can you see the difference in terms of the sarcomere length? Nampak ni? Ni masa muscle tengah relax, look at the Z line. Okay, look at the sarcomere length. Okay, nampak besar. As the muscle contracting, you can see, nampak tak ni? Sarcomere become shorten. Daripada sini, now dia jadi pendek macam ni sahaja. Shorten. Sarcomere shorten. And look at the I band. Okay, this is when the muscle is relaxed. Look at the I band. Sangat terang. So kawasan ni kawasan yang only composed of the thin filament. Nampak tak sini? But as the muscle contracting, look at the I band. The I band become shrinks. Okay, similarly to the H zone. Look at the here. Kawasan yang cerah ni agak besar. But now you can see kawasan cerah dia semakin kecil. Okay, so kalau tak faham juga tengok yang ni. Nampak? A band sama je. Thick filament punya length sama, kekal. Tak ada yang berubah. Okay, yang berubah hanya this one. Sarcomere become shorten. Okay, the I band shrinks. I band. And the H zone also shrinks. Okay, you can see the overlapping of the thin and thick filament. Okay, boleh?
Boleh, madam.
Okay, alright. Okay, so finish with that. Okay, so remember the concept in muscle contraction, there is no change in terms of length of thin or thick filament. What happened is just the sarcomere shorten, right? The I band and the H zone become shrinks. That's it. Okay, right. Kenapa jadi macam tu? Because the thin and the thick filament are sliding each other. Okay, right. And become more overlap. Okay. So now let's see another factors that contribute to the skeletal muscle contraction. Instead of the ATP sahaja, bukan sahaja ATP, but we have another role, okay, of muscle contraction, which are the calcium ion, okay, the neuron, the T-tubules and whatnot. So ada component that contribute to the muscle contraction. So now we are going to see the role of neuromuscular junction, the sarcoplasmic reticulum, the calcium ion, the ATP, myofibrils and T-tubule together. Okay. Okay, so the role of sarcoplasmic reticulum and the T-tubule in the muscle contraction. Okay, but before that, again, repeat, this is our motor neuron, okay, that forming synapse to our muscle fiber. Okay, so let's see the detailed structure of the muscle fiber dulu. Detailed structure, okay. So the first one is here, nampak ni yang macam longkang ni, macam longkang ni namanya T-tubule. Okay, T-tubule. Okay. Next one, sarcoplasmic reticulum. So sarcoplasmic reticulum yang mana? Ni yang warna biru ni, macam jaringan yang warna biru ni. Okay, jaringan yang warna biru ni, ataupun kalau kat sini kita nampak ini ni, yang warna biru ni, semua ni adalah sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay. Next one is, ingat ni satu bulatan besar ni kita punya muscle fiber. Dalam muscle fiber we have another bundle of ni myofibrils. So ini adalah myofibrils. Dalam myofibrils ni yang ada kita punya thin filament and thick filament just now. Okay. So this is the sarcoplasmic reticulum yang macam longkang ni T-tubule, and you can see they are connected to the myofibrils. Okay, this is myofibrils. And yang warna-warna hijau ni apa pula? Warna hijau bulat-bulat ni is calcium ion. Okay, so calcium ion is released from sarcoplasmic reticulum. So nampak ni warna hijau kat sini. So calcium ion tu initially is inside the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay. Alright. And then apa lagi? Last one is of course ni lah plasma membrane of muscle fiber. So this is the plasma membrane. Okay. Right? So dah kenal all the structure of the muscle fiber. Now we go to the mechanism. Okay. Contraction of skeletal muscle is stimulated by somatic motor neuron of the efferent pathway. Okay. Of the efferent pathway. The axon branches and forms synapse with the muscle fiber. You can see the axon of the motor neuron forming synapse to the muscle fiber. And this junction known as neuromuscular junction. So ingat kalau keluar soalan sebut pasal neuromuscular junction, jangan terkejut pula. Ingat neuromuscular junction ialah the synapse ataupun the junction between the neuron, which is the motor neuron, and also the muscle fiber. Okay. Synaptic terminal release acetylcholine, cause the muscle to depolarize, okay, forming action potential or producing action potential. So the action potential spread to the T-tubule. Okay, cerita dia macam ni. Okay, faham betul-betul Okay, kita dah belajar dekat hujung synaptic, the axon ni, it release neurotransmitter. Okay, apa nama neurotransmitter dia? Kita dah tengok tadi. Nama dia acetylcholine. Okay. What will happen to the acetylcholine? Acetylcholine bind to the receptor on the postsynaptic membrane of the muscle fiber. Right? And thus causing EPSP. Okay. So bila apa jadi masa EPSP? The membrane become permeable toward sodium ion, sodium influx, and makes the membrane to become depolarized. So membrane mana yang depolarized ni? Ni. Membrane of our muscle fiber become depolarized. So the depolarization of the muscle able to reach the threshold and then producing action potential. So bila ada action potential, impulse akan lalu. Impulse akan disebarkan. So impulse akan lalu. Okay. So as impulse is transmitted, the impulse transmission reaches to the T-tubule. So impulse tu akan reach sampai this T-tubule. Okay. So the depolarization producing action potential, and action potential spread to the T-tubule. Tersebar sampai ke T-tubule ni. So next what happened? So the T-tubule spread the impulse, right, or the action potential towards the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So as the T-tubule pun mengalami depolarization and producing action potential, so this action potential spread to the sarcoplasmic reticulum sampai terserak ataupun sampai tersebar ke sarcoplasmic reticulum ni. Okay. So what happened? Right? So this will trigger the calcium ion tolong tambah dalam nota, calcium ion, okay, to be released by the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So remember, siapa yang simpan sarcoplasmic reticulum tu? Siapa yang simpan calcium ion tu? Sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay. So what happened to the calcium ion? The calcium ion initiate the sliding filament by allowing myosin to bind to the actin. Okay, so you can see this picture just now. So as the action potential spread to from the T-tubule to the sarcoplasmic reticulum, it stimulates the sarcoplasmic reticulum to release calcium ion. Okay, where calcium ion stimulate the sliding of myosin and actin filament. So sarcoplasmic reticulum akan calcium ion akan dikeluarkan daripada sarcoplasmic reticulum into the myofibril and initiate the sliding filament just now. Okay, right. Okay, setakat tu faham tak? Setakat cerita sampai calcium ion tu dilepaskan, dibebaskan or release from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Setakat tu faham ke tak? Setakat tu faham ke?
Itu macam mana?
Okay, itu yang kita akan belajar lepas ni. Setakat yang kita baru nak masuk, macam mana dia boleh initiate. Okay, so far faham tak? From the action potential, from the acetylcholine and then sampai the release of calcium ion. Setakat tu faham tak?
InsyaAllah faham, Madam.
Okay, alright. So nanti kalau tak faham, try tengok video lagi, okay? But you can ask. Kalau tak faham mana-mana part, ask, okay? Okay, so now what happened to the calcium ion tadi? Okay, tadi kita sampai sini je. Calcium ion release from the sarcoplasmic reticulum and initiate the sliding filament. by allowing myosin to bind to actin. So the question tadi, macam kawan kita tanya tadi, how the calcium ion initiate the sliding, right? Or the allowing the myosin and actin to slide each other. So this is the role of calcium ion. Okay, what is the function of the calcium ion in the muscle contraction? Calcium ion and the regulatory protein control the muscle contraction. Okay, remember the regulatory protein tadi. Regulatory protein tadi dekat siapa? Actin ke myosin? Ni, tengok ni. Ni, regulatory protein. Regulatory protein is the protein that can be found on the actin's filament named as troponin and tropomyosin. Ingat tadi, troponin dengan tropomyosin. Ni, troponin yang warna purple, tropomyosin yang ini. Okay, right. So, sekarang ni, calcium ion and the regulatory protein control the muscle contraction. Okay, so what happened just now? Calcium ion tadi are stored in the sarcoplasmic reticulum, remember? Okay, and the nerve impulse, the action potential just now stimulate the release of calcium ion from sarcoplasmic reticulum. So now what happened to the calcium ion? Okay, right. When the muscle is at rest. Okay, sekarang kita tengok apa kerja, apa tugas calcium ion tu. Okay, when the muscle is in rest, at rest, muscle kita dalam keadaan rest, the myosin binding site on the thin filament are blocked by the regulatory protein. Myosin binding site. So which one is the myosin binding site? Ni. Ni myosin binding site ni yang ni. Nampak tak lubang ni? Ataupun kita panggil actin active site. Mana tambah Dia boleh tambah ayat. Ataupun nama dia actin active site. Okay, right. Okay, so the myosin binding site, this one ingat ni, yang macam beads ni, yang ada lubang tu kita panggil myosin binding site or actin active site, nama dia. Okay, so when the muscle is relaxed, the myosin binding site or the actin active site on the thin filament are blocked by the regulatory protein known as tropomyosin. You can see lubang ni tadi ni, the myosin binding site. Myosin binding site maksudnya tempat di mana myosin akan bind dekat actin tu. Specific tempat dekat mana myosin akan forming the cross bridge tu, kita panggil myosin binding site. Okay, right. So you can see that when the muscle is relaxed, this myosin binding site or the actin active site is blocked by the tropomyosin. Ni, dia tutup by the tropomyosin. Okay, right. But when the muscle fiber is contracting, okay, the myosin binding site or tadi, nama tadi lain, the myosin binding site / actin active site must be uncovered. So in order for the muscle to contract, ni, myosin binding site ni or the actin active site ni mesti uncover. Dia mestilah buka, terdedah. So bila terdedah, ada lubang tu, barulah myosin akan forming the cross bridge. Okay, so macam mana nak pastikan dia uncover? Okay. So this occur when the calcium ion that is released from the sarcoplasmic reticulum bind to the another set of regulatory protein known as troponin complex. Okay, troponin complex. So you can see the calcium tadi release kan? Calcium tu will bind to another set of regulatory protein yang warna purple ni namanya troponin. Okay, so calcium bind to the troponin first. Okay, setakat tu okay? Setakat tu okay?
Okay, madam.
So madam pergi slow sorry kalau you rasa macam alamak madam ni cakap lambat betul lah. Okay, sorry, I try to explain. Okay, tapi itulah. Okay, so what happened to the calcium as it binds to the troponin complex? Ni, calcium binds to the troponin complex and cause conformational changes. Conformational changes here means perubahan. Okay, change in shape. Okay, change in shape. So troponin complex cause conformational change. And then what happened? Tropomyosin complex move aside. Okay, ni you tengok ni. So bila calcium bind to the troponin complex, it cause this conformational changes. Akan berlaku sedikit perubahan. And that's what happened. The tropomyosin complex move aside. Dia macam seolah-olah dia pergi ke tepi dan dia buka. Dia mendedahkan siapa nama ni? Myosin binding site. Okay, right. So as troponin-tropomyosin complex move aside, it exposed the actin active site or the myosin binding site just now and thus lead to the formation of cross bridge. So bila dah terbuka, terdedah the myosin binding site, allowing myosin head to bind. Remember macam mana myosin head boleh bind? Tadi, when the myosin head hydrolyze ATP to form ADP and phosphate, lepas tu myosin head at high energy configuration and then dia forming the cross bridge, tu semua. Okay, kita kena kaitkan dengan prosedur yang tadi, mekanisme tadi yang ATP tu. Okay, right. And then what happened? The thick and the thin filaments slide past each other and then the muscle fiber will contract. So as that, muscle will contract. Okay, boleh faham? Now let's combine everything together. Okay, Madam pergi slow-slow kat sini You have this picture in textbook. Okay, the first one, of course, this is the neuromuscular junction of the synaptic motor neuron to the muscle fiber. So ini kita punya muscle fiber. Tengok betul-betul kat sini penting. Okay. The first one is acetylcholine. Remember this one? Acetylcholine released by the synaptic terminal and it release and diffuse across the synaptic cleft and bind to the receptor protein on the muscle fibrous plasma membrane and trigger action potential in the fiber. So it causes EPSP, right? Membrane permeable to sodium ion, sodium influx, all right? Cause depolarization to reach threshold and then forming the action potential. So when the action potential occur, you can see the action potential spread along the membrane. You can see, nampak ni. Action potential is propagated along the membrane. Action potential ni depolarization, repolarization, depolarization, blah, 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 berterusan ni, right? Propagated along the membrane and then down, spread down to the T-tubule. So ni, T-tubule. Okay, so the action potential at the T-tubule ni tadi triggers the release of calcium ion from sarcoplasmic reticulum. So as the action potential spread from the T-tubule into the sarcoplasmic reticulum, it triggers the release of calcium ion from the sarcoplasmic reticulum, right, into the, pergi mana ni calcium ion ni semua? Pergi masuk ke dalam cytosol of our muscle fiber ni, myofibril. Okay, masuk ke sini. Okay, so next what happened to the calcium ion just now? Okay, one cytosolic calcium ion is removed. Nombor 4. Calcium ion bind to the troponin. Ni, calcium ion bind to the troponin yang warna purple ni. Right? And then what happened to the troponin just now? Troponin change, the conformational change happen. Right? And then the troponin-tropomyosin complex move aside and then exposing the myosin binding site or actin active site. You can see, nampak ni. Calcium ion bind to the troponin in the thin filament and then the myosin binding site is now exposed. Okay. So when the myosin binding site is now exposed, the myosin can forming the cross bridge. Okay. So yang ini yang melibatkan ATP yang kita dah bincangkan tadi tu. Mula-mula tadi. Okay. Right. The cycle of myosin cross bridge formation and breakdown occur coupled with ATP hydrolysis and the slide of the thin and thin filament toward the center of sarcomere. So the process tu akan berlaku macam kita bincangkan tadi. Okay, so when the ATP hydrolyzed to ADP and phosphate, so myosin head is at high energy configuration and forming the cross bridge. Okay, and then the myosin head couple the release, buang serentak ADP and phosphate to form the power stroke. So it pull toward the center of sarcomere. So that's why the muscle contracting. The cycle continues. Okay. And then what happened? After the action potential has ends, so maksudnya bila muscle kita dah nak masuk ke fasa relaxing, so after the action potential ends, the cytosolic calcium ion is removed by the active transport. So what will happen to the calcium ion? The calcium ion will be removed back to the sarcoplasmic reticulum by using active transport. Okay, masuk balik from low concentration here in the cytosol to high concentration inside the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay, so what happened? One cytosolic calcium ion is removed. Of course, tropomyosin again will block the myosin binding site and the contraction ends and the muscle relax. So you can see, alright. So the troponin tropomyosin complex then cover balik, tutup balik, back to original conformation. So no formation of cross bridge. Okay, so as you can see as overall picture here, it related to the ATP, it relates to the calcium ion, it does relates also with the nervous system. Okay, in other words, kalau tak ada nerve impulses, no action potential of the muscle fiber, can the muscle contract? Can the muscle contract?
No.
If there is no action potential?
No, madam.
No. Okay, sebab this depolarization or action potential that occur with the release of acetylcholine is important to stimulate the release of calcium ion from the sarcoplasmic reticulum kan. So kalau no release of calcium ion, meaning that ni, the tropomyosin will stay covering ataupun will stay blocking the myosin binding site. So no formation of cross bridge walaupun ATPU dah dihydrolysekan. Walaupun ATP dah hydrolyse, myosin head dah siap dah ni, kepala dia dah nak naik ni, tapi tak boleh nak forming cross bridge sebab the myosin binding site is blocked. Okay, is blocked. Okay, faham tak tu? Any question? Any question?
Madam,
Yes.
maksudnya kan yang proses ATP tu yang dia berlaku berulang-ulang kali lah kan?
Selagi ada ATP.
Selagi ada ATP. Okay.
Maksudnya selagi kita hidup ni, kita ada oksigen, oksigen akan terlibat dalam proses respiration to produce ATP, So ATP tu can be used. One of it is for our body to work to contract and whatnot, right? So if there is no ATP, ATP dah tak ada, tu yang jadi muscle cramp lah kan. Kalau orang kan, that's why kalau kita bersukan, ATP dah terlebih, oksigen depleted and whatnot, so ATP pun tak dapat dihasilkan dengan lengkap, so jadilah aerobic respiration, anaerobic respiration. So kita akan rasalah muscle tu cramp dan sebagainya semua. Okay, but somehow you have to know that even though we have a lot of ATP, but if there is no action potential propagated along the T-tubule and spread to the sarcoplasmic reticulum, so no calcium ion release into the cytosol, so there will be no formation of cross bridge. Okay, right. Lagi soalan? Soalan? Tak ada? Okay, tak ada. Now let's see what is the molecular mechanism of the muscle relaxation. So tadi muscle contraction. Now muscle relaxation. So of course it started with the impulse. Impulse must be stopped first. No impulse. So meaning bila no impulse, membrane during that time is either repolarization, at the state of repolarization, or hyperpolarization. So no impulse. So neurons stop releasing acetylcholine, ACH. In exam you can use ACH to represent acetylcholine. Boleh. Dengan syarat capital A, capital C, small h. Kalau salah ni, salah. Okay, right. Next, so neurons stop release acetylcholine. So then, kalau tak ada acetylcholine, so the T-tubule stop producing impulse. So the muscle membrane is repolarized. So as the muscle repolarized, calcium ion will be actively transported back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So calcium ion akan dimasukkan semula. Because no impulse, so calcium ion akan balik duduk dalam sarcoplasmic reticulum. So calcium ion no longer bound to troponin molecule, right? So apa jadi kalau calcium tidak lagi bind kepada troponin? Jadi troponin tropomyosin complex return to its original position, which blocking the myosin binding site. So the myosin binding site, tambah ayat kat sini, myosin. Myosin binding site ataupun tadi apa? Actin active site is blocked. Okay, myosin binding site are blocked, and then no formation of cross bridge. So then the muscle is relaxed. Okay. So let's continue. Okay. So now kita increase kita punya nervous system. Okay, right. Okay, so finish with the neuromuscular junction part. Okay. So kita dah belajar on the mechanism of muscle contraction, in the assistance ataupun in the role of calcium ion, in the role of ATPs and the nervous impulse, right? That lead to the muscular contraction. Okay, so now this subtopic, I guess this is the last subtopic, but I'm not sure we can able to finish within half an hour, but we try out. Okay, so we are going to detail out the autonomic nervous system. Okay, autonomic nervous system ni yang mana pula? Ingat balik branches of kita punya nervous system. So our LO here is to differentiate between sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, right? So sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system is branch of autonomic nervous system. So kat mana dia tu? Okay, so remember this is our main our organization of nervous system. So central nervous system, peripheral nervous system. So peripheral nervous system divided into two, afferent and efferent motor pathway. Okay, right? So under motor pathway divided into two. Okay, the motor system and also the autonomic nervous system. So motor system kita dah touch tadi during muscle contraction. Kita dah touch. Okay, where our nervous system, our neuron, synapse ataupun synapse or send the impulse to the motor pathway, which is towards the skeletal muscle contraction. Whereby the skeletal muscle contraction, we can control or regulate ourselves, how the strength to the contraction. Okay. As in the branch of autonomic nervous system ialah branch of efferent pathway, right, of the peripheral nervous system, which we are not able to regulate or control. Okay, kalau motor system involve skeletal muscle, kita boleh control. It is a voluntary contraction. As for autonomic, it is involuntary, meaning we cannot control. Contoh, the peristalsis, contraction of our esophagus during churning of food, kita tak boleh control. Okay, apa lagi kita tak boleh control? Tindakan reflex, kita tak boleh control. Digestion, kita tak boleh control benda tu. Okay, blinking of eyes, kita tak boleh control. So that is under autonomic nervous system. Okay, to increase the heart rate or lowering the heart rate, kita tak boleh control. Okay, so this autonomic nervous system are divided into three branches. Okay, sympathetic, parasympathetic and also enteric. So ini ejaan salah macam yang ke depan tu. Enteric, E-N-T-E-R-I-C. Okay, so autonomic nervous system yang kita nak kena fokus is only sympathetic and parasympathetic. So sympathetic involved in mobilization of energy, whereby parasympathetic involved in conservation of energy. Mobilization of energy means it needs it happen during fight or flight. Kita perlukan tenaga yang banyak. Contoh macam masa kena berlari, masa kita kena kejar anjing ke, masa kita tengah dalam keadaan mood adrenaline rush, so itu sympathetic. Okay, as for parasympathetic, it is in the calmness state or condition, dalam keadaan tenang, relax, also parasympathetic. Okay, right. So let's see the branches of peripheral nervous system first. Kita dah discuss. So central nervous system is our brain and also spinal cord. Okay, and the branch of peripheral nervous system. Okay, so peripheral nervous system consists of cranial nerves that originate from the brain. So this is cranial nerve yang originate from the brain, and spinal nerve that originate in pairs along the spinal cord and emerge between the vertebrae. So this is our spinal cord. So nerve that originate in pairs, right? Yang daripada ke kanan ke kiri ni semua ni, dan emerge from the vertebrae, dan dia orang kata apa, terkeluarlah daripada kita punya tulang belakang. So kita panggil sebagai spinal nerves. So ni spinal nerve. Okay, right. And number 3 is ganglia. So ganglia is cluster of cell body where its axon transmit impulse to the internal organ. So this is ganglia yang nampak macam bulat-bulat sikit ni, yang betul bujur tebal-tebal ni. So this is what I call as ganglia. So ganglia is cluster of cell body where its axon transmit impulse to the internal organ. So dia boleh synapse dengan organ. Okay, right. So now let's see the function of peripheral nervous system. Okay, peripheral nervous system transmit information to and from the central nervous system. It comprises of afferent and efferent pathway. So ni kita dah bincang sebelum ni. Kita ada lukis masa awal-awal chapter dulu. Right? So bayangkan this is our central nervous system. Example here is spinal cord. Right? So this is our skin, where our skin maybe contohnya it receive stimulus from external. Contohnya ada jarum ke tercucuk, ada haba ke, api ke, paku ke. So any stimulus detected by our skin. So the information will be transmitted towards the central nervous system via afferent pathway. And the information will be processed by our central nervous system, and the effect ataupun the responses will be sent out towards our effector, which is muscle at the efferent pathway. Okay, efferent remember ada dua branch, efferent, somatic ataupun autonomic. Okay, kalau somatic inilah pergi kepada skeletal muscle contohnya. Okay, so the peripheral nervous system regulate vertebrates movement and internal environment. So it doesn't affect responses to external only, but also involved in internal environment. Okay, sensory information reaches the central nervous system along afferent pathway. So ni, sensory information reaches the central nervous system along the afferent pathway. Okay, next, the process information at the central nervous system will be travel to the effector through the efferent pathway. So ingat E is exit. So yang keluar lah. Right, so ni. The process information will be travel to the effector through the efferent pathway. Okay, right. Any question tanya ya? Okay. The efferent pathway of peripheral nervous system divided into two functional components, the motor system and autonomic nervous system. So branch of efferent ada dua, motor and autonomic. So let's see the motor first. Motor system. Motor system carry signal to the skeletal muscle. You can see here. Mana sana? Ni. Kita dah belajar dah ni. Carry the information. Ni. This one is central nervous system. So ini branch of the efferent pathway ni of somatic motor neuron. Send signal to the or carry signal to the skeletal muscle. Okay, so what will happen to the skeletal muscle? Kita dah belajar dah tadi. Acetylcholine release, blah 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 blah, and muscle contract tu. Okay, and it can be voluntary. Voluntary means we can control or regulate ourselves. For example, as when raise hand to ask question. So kita boleh control everything. Okay, so that is voluntary. Or somehow it may be involved in voluntary, where when it is involved in the control by the spinal cord. Contoh the knee jerk. Kan ada bukan eksperimen, ada yang doktor ketuk lutut kita tu. Lutut kita dia ketuk dan lutut kita boleh jerking, right? So lutut kita akan bergerak sendiri tu. So that is one reflex. So mostly skeletal muscle contraction is voluntary except for knee jerk reflex. So this is involuntary. Okay. How about autonomic nervous system? Okay, autonomic nervous system generally involuntary. We cannot control. Contoh, regulation of smooth muscle and cardiac muscle. So smooth muscle contoh kat mana? Kita punya peristalsis of esophagus. Bila kita telan makanan tu lalu dekat esophagus kita tak boleh rasa pun. And even we cannot control pun macam mana kita punya esophagus tu contract. Right, as well as our contraction of cardiac muscle. Okay, right. So again, you can see this is autonomic efferent pathway sending the information towards the effector. The effector here is the smooth muscle. Okay, right. And you can see something different here. Nampak Tolong tengok daripada sekarang. Nampak tak ni? For the autonomic efferent pathway, look at the neuron. How many number of neuron here? How many neurons you can see here?
3 ke madam?
Berapa tu? Dua. You can see. Satu kat sini. Ni, nampak ni. Yang bulat ni maksudnya adalah cell body. This one is axon and synapse to another neuron. Okay, so ada dua. Nampak ni, dia tulis presynaptic. Okay. And this one is postsynaptic axon. So meaning that ada dua neuron. Presynaptic axon, maksudnya ada neuron sini, and this one is postsynaptic neuron. That is for autonomic. As for somatic just now, cuba tengok somatic. How many neurons? How many neurons?
Satu.
Satu sahaja. Okay. So why I'm stressing on this? Sebab kejap lagi kita nak pergi kepada comparison dia. So kena perhati betul-betul. Okay. Somatic have only one neuron at the efferent pathway. Tengok ni dekat efferent pathway ada satu neuron sahaja. As for autonomic, you can see there are two neurons at the efferent pathway. Two neurons. One. Okay. And here is two. Okay. Right. Next. So the autonomic nervous system is regulating smooth and cardiac muscle, and usually they are involuntary, and the medulla oblongata coordinate the autonomic system. So this autonomic nervous system is regulated by medulla oblongata. Okay, medulla kat mana? Tak payah tanya sebab you dah belajar, dah buat assignment kan. Dah pasal gases exchange tu, you dah tahu dah medulla tu kat mana. Okay, alright. So look at this picture. Mungkin dia pecah sikit. Okay, this is the comparison between the somatic motor neuron and autonomic motor neuron. Okay, tolong perhati betul-betul. Okay, sama. This is efferent pathway. Kenapa efferent? Because remember the neuron is sending to the effectors. So ini adalah efferent pathway. Kalau afferent dia akan bermula daripada sensory. Maksudnya dia akan daripada sini masuk ke sini. Okay, itu adalah afferent. Maksudnya daripada kita punya sensory. Contoh tangan kita lah. Tangan kita pegang something. Contoh paku. Right? So this is afferent pathway. Ni afferent. AFF. Afferent Ni afferent. So it is processed in the central nervous system. Right? And the information will be sending out to efferent pathway. So yang ni adalah kita panggil efferent pathway. Okay. So the difference is that the efferent pathway divided into two just now, somatic and autonomic. So how to differentiate which one is somatic, which one is autonomic? So first, by looking at the number of neuron at the efferent pathway. First, for somatic, somatic, the number of neuron at the efferent pathway is only one, and it synapses to the skeletal muscle. Okay, because it is voluntary action. As for autonomic motor neuron, for autonomic, the number of neuron at the efferent pathway is 2. Ni, satu. Ni, namanya preganglionic neuron. I will touch after this. Second one is, this one yang bulat dengan yang hujung ni. So ini satu neuron lagi. Namanya postganglionic neuron. Okay? And it synapses with smooth muscle, cardiac muscle or glands. Okay, to increase or decrease secretion. Okay, setakat tu nampak tak? Setakat tu boleh tak?
Nampak.
Okay, alright. So macam mana nak lukis dalam buku ni, kena conteng dalam buku. So macam mana nak lukis, you ikut cara manual lukis ni. Kalau yang bentuk bulat, itu adalah menunjukkan cell body. Sekali dengan dendrite semua tu. So bila yang menegak panjang tu, itu adalah axon. Kalau yang macam ujung ni, axon terminal. So tu cara nak lukis. So tak payahlah lukis neuron yang sampai susah-susah nak lukis tu kan. Okay, buat macam ni je dah boleh faham. Okay, alright. So again, lagi sekali, Mina tunjuk lagi sekali. Okay, so lukis gambar ni, kena lukis. Right, for the somatic nervous system or somatic motor neuron, remember how many motor neuron at the efferent pathway? 1, this one. And synapse to skeletal muscle. Okay, for autonomic nervous system, it has 2 neurons at the efferent pathway. The first one known as preganglionic neuron and postganglionic neuron. And they synapse with smooth muscle, cardiac muscle or gland cells. Okay, right. Okay, and here we have the ganglions. So ingat tu ganglions tu apa? Kita dah tengok tadi, awal-awal tadi, ganglion. Okay, right. So dekat hujung sini akan ada neurotransmitter release. Dekat sini pun akan ada neurotransmitter release. But for somatic motor neuron, neurotransmitter only release here at the neuromuscular junction. For autonomic nervous system, there are 2 times where neurotransmitter will be released. One is at the ganglion, one is at the synapse between smooth muscle, cardiac muscle or gland cells. Okay. Setakat ni okay Meda pergi slow sebab benda ni penting sangat. Okay. Alright. Next. Now let's go to the division of autonomic nervous system. Okay. So sekarang ni kita dah faham beza somatic and autonomic. Now we are going to detail out autonomic nervous system. Okay, autonomic nervous system tadi ada berapa branch?
2.
Berapa branch under autonomic? Pergi balik ke organisation of kita punya nervous system. Ada
3.
berapa branch?
3.
Yeah, apa dia tu?
Sympathetic,
And
parasympathetic, and
Yes, 3. Sympathetic, parasympathetic and also enteric. So our job now is to differentiate the 2 major branch of autonomic nervous system tadi, sympathetic and parasympathetic. So itu kita punya aim. So as such kita kena faham lah macam mana structure autonomic nervous system. Kena faham, okay? So ingat autonomic nervous system dia punya number of neuron at the efferent pathway ada 2. Preganglionic neuron, postganglionic neuron. So what is the difference between sympathetic and parasympathetic? So kita nak pergi detail dia, okay? Okay, so the branches of autonomic nervous system made up of 3 divisions, sympathetic, parasympathetic and enteric. So enteric control digestive system kita, including digestive tract, the pancreas and also gallbladder. So our focus here is only sympathetic and parasympathetic. Okay, sympathetic and parasympathetic work together to regulate organ of the digestive, cardiovascular, kita punya jantung, okay, excretory and also endocrine system. Endocrine system is hormonal system. So they work together to control major systems of our body. Okay, sympathetic division correspond to arousal and energy generation. So like I said, sympathetic involved during responses to arousal. Arousal here ni kalau bahasa Melayu kita panggil apa arousal. During sexual activities, okay, arousal and energy generation during fight or flights. Contoh macam bila kita tengah undergoing adrenaline rush. So masa ni sympathetic will function. Okay, right. As for parasympathetic, so parasympathetic division cause opposite response where it promote calming and return to self-maintenance function. For example, in resting or in digestion. Okay, maksudnya bila kita dalam keadaan tenang, relax, lepas makan. So ini semua adalah parasympathetic. Okay. So what is the difference between sympathetic and parasympathetic? Like I said, sympathetic and parasympathetic involve 2 neurons at the efferent pathway sebab they are under branch of autonomic nervous system. Okay, ingat autonomic nervous system tadi ada 2 motor neuron at the efferent pathway, right? The preganglionic neuron and the postganglionic neuron. Okay. Kalau lupa, Meda tunjuk balik. This one. Ni. Autonomic nervous system has 2 neurons at the efferent pathway. So, meaning that sympathetic dengan parasympathetic pun mesti ada 2 neurons. Okay. At the efferent pathway. Preganglionic and postganglionic neuron. Okay. Okay. So, the first one is preganglionic neuron. So, which one is preganglionic neuron? This one. And mostly are myelinated. So yang datang daripada central nervous system ni and then synapse dengan autonomic ganglion ni preganglionic neuron. And the postganglionic neuron will be synapse to the smooth muscle, cardiac muscle or gland cell. Okay, ni Alright. And you can see there are 2 times where neurotransmitter will be released. So at the autonomic ganglion, it will release acetylcholine. Okay. At the postganglionic neuron that synapse to the skeletal muscle or smooth muscle, it will release either acetylcholine or NE. NE here means norepinephrine. Okay, ataupun bahasa Melayu, noradrenaline. Cik bahasa Melayu. Okay, right. So, now let's see the detail of preganglionic neuron. You have class at 10?
Yes, madam.
Ada kelas apa?
Ada madam. Ada seni Islam.
You are.
Okay. Alright. Selalu punya online ke tengok video?
Online tapi tadi medium cakap minta tak sihat.
Oh,
Tak
yes.
tahu.
Oh, yes. Okay, so just let me know kalau mana terlebih masa, bagi tahu kejap. Okay, so sikit je lagi nak habis ni. Okay, now let's see the preganglic neuron. Okay, the preganglic neuron is this one. Okay, preganglic neuron, the cell body is located inside the central nervous system. Ni, cell body ni yang bulat ni. You can see for preganglic neuron, the cell body is in the central nervous system. So ni, dalam central nervous system. And send an axon to the autonomic ganglion. And the axon is sent to the autonomic ganglion. Okay, right. As for sympathetic or parasympathetic, they will release acetylcholine at its synapse. So, tak kisahlah sympathetic ke parasympathetic ke, dua-dua akan release acetylcholine dekat sini at the autonomic ganglion. Alright? Okay, so the first one. As for postganglionic neuron, postganglionic neuron yang ini. Okay, for postganglionic neuron, the cell body is in the autonomic ganglion. Ni, cell body is in the autonomic ganglion and send its axon to synapse with smooth muscle, cardiac muscle or gland cell. Okay, so nampak ni, smooth muscle, cardiac muscle or gland cell. Okay, and for parasympathetic, it will release acetylcholine at the synapse. Okay, untuk parasympathetic, dia akan release acetylcholine. As for during sympathetic, so untuk semasa sympathetic, it will release norepinephrine at its synapse. So ni, NE, norepinephrine at its synapse. So that is the difference that you can see between one difference between sympathetic and parasympathetic. So the neurotransmitter release at the synapse, okay, at the end of the synapse with skeletal muscle, smooth muscle or cardiac muscle, okay. Not skeletal muscle, sorry, smooth muscle, cardiac muscle or gland cells, okay. Okay, so this picture showing you the difference between the action of sympathetic and parasympathetic. So soalan kita sekarang ni, macam mana nak bezakan sympathetic dan parasympathetic? And what are the differences action between sympathetic and parasympathetic? Okay, so kita buat ni kat you all. Okay. So tengok sini betul-betul. Tengok ni dulu and then I go to this one. Okay. What are the differences between the division of autonomic nervous system, which are the sympathetic and parasympathetic? Okay. So tengok sini gambar ni. Alright. Dua-dua adalah autonomic nervous system. Kenapa? Because you can see two neurons at the efferent pathway. Nampak ni? Ni satu, ni dua. Okay. Ini satu, yang ni dua. So what are the differences between sympathetic dengan parasympathetic? So the first one here is the length of neuron. Okay. Ini tak ada dalam video. Dalam video tak cerita pun. Okay. So ni boleh terangkan kat you all. So length of the neuron. So for sympathetic, ni adalah sympathetic ya. Okay, sorry. Betul-betul. Okay. This is sympathetic. Nampak ni? Preganglionic neuron, postganglionic neuron. Sympathetic preganglionic neuron, sympathetic postganglionic neuron. So, for sympathetic postganglionic neuron, it has short preganglionic neuron and long postganglionic neuron. Nampak ni? Preganglionic neuron, you bandingkan dengan postganglionic neuron. So preganglionic neuron lagi panjang daripada postganglionic neuron. Okay, ataupun bila lukis balik kat sini. Okay. Bayangkan macam ni lah. Okay. This is preganglionic neuron. And this is postganglionic neuron. And this is kita punya muscle. Contoh. Okay. Nampak So for sympathetic nervous system, the preganglionic neuron is shorter than the postganglionic neuron. Okay. Faham Faham tak?
Faham.
Okay. So what are neurotransmitter release at the synapse? So for in the autonomic ganglion, it release acetylcholine, right? And at the synapse, it release norepinephrine. Norepinephrine ataupun noradrenaline. Okay. Kenapa? Because this is one is sympathetic division. sympathetic division involved in mobilization of energy. So nanti kita tengok apa efek dia kalau norepinephrine yang di release at the synapse to the smooth muscle, cardiac muscle or gland cells. Okay. As for parasympathetic, you can see parasympathetic preganglionic neuron is longer than the postganglionic neuron. If we draw, okay, bayangkan macam ni lah. This is preganglionic neuron. This one is postganglionic neuron. And this is our effector. Skeletal muscle, smooth muscle, no skeletal muscle, sorry. Smooth muscle, cardiac muscle or gland cell. So you can see the preganglionic neuron is longer than the postganglionic neuron. So, and what are the neurotransmitter release? The neurotransmitter release at both synapses are acetylcholine. Okay, kenapa? Because parasympathetic is involved in conservation of energy, okay, ataupun calming and so on. Okay, ini tu pertama. Okay, now let's see the origin of the pathway, okay, ataupun the sympathetic, you can see the sympathetic pathway or division originate from the thoracic and lumbar region of the spinal cord. Maksudnya kebanyakan sympathetic division dia berasal daripada thoracic and lumbar. Thoracic kat sini, kawasan sini tulang belakang kita. Okay, thoracic and also lumbar. Lumbar ni dekat pinggang, kawasan dekat pinggang Okay, so ni lumbar, this one thoracic. Thoracic dekat belakang lah. Okay, ni. Cervical dekat dengan leher nak ke tengkorak kepala ni. Okay, right. Okay, as for parasympathetic division originates mostly from the sacral region of the spinal cord. So mostly yang untuk parasympathetic, it's originate mainly or mostly from the sacral area. So sacral ni dekat tulang tongking, tulang pinggul tu ke bawah tu. Sana. Okay. So what are the differences in the activities ataupun the what you call it physiological changes as the sympathetic nervous system is activated ataupun involved. Okay. Contoh, ingat tadi sympathetic division bertindak masa bila? Masa mobilization of energy. Kita bagi satu situation. You tengah lapar tapi you kena kejar anjing masa tu. Okay? So apa akan jadi? You kena kejar anjing tapi you tengah lapar sangat masa tu. Tiba-tiba kena kejar anjing. So sympathetic pathway or sympathetic division will be activated. Right? So remember, apa jadi dekat neuron, dia akan synapse kepada kita punya cardiac muscle, cardiac muscle, smooth muscle and glands, alright? And then it will release noradrenaline at the end of the synapse and it will trigger this thing to happen. Contoh, 1, dilates your pupil. So mata you akan nampak semua longkang, semua batu, semua pagar yang you akan terjun. You akan lompat nanti. Okay? Sebab you kena kejar anjing, so you kena cari jalan nak lepaskan diri you. Okay, so pupil will dilate. You akan nampak jalan. Next, ingat tadi tengah lapar kan? It will inhibit salivary gland. So you tengah lapar, tak adanya you akan terfikir KFC ke, ailu meleleh, nampak makanan tak ada. You akan fokus kepada nak selamatkan diri pada masa tersebut. Next, it will relax your bronchi. Kita punya bronchus akan relax so that lagi kembang to receive more air. Of course, heart rate will increase sebab kita perlukan more oxygen untuk kita lari and escape from that danger. And it will inhibit activity of stomach and intestine. So during that time you lapar tapi you kena kejar anjing, you akan lupa pasal you punya lapar, perut you pun akan hilang keroncong-keroncong dia tu. Right, so that will be happen. Next, it will also inhibit activity of pancreas. So pancreas pun tak akan buat kerja untuk digest food, but then it will stimulate the release of glucose from the liver. So glucose akan banyak lagi dilepaskan from the liver. Okay, so liver kita akan glycogen stored in the liver will be converted into glucose. Okay, so glucose is needed when that particular thing happen. So it stimulate your adrenal medulla. So adrenal will release more adrenaline, right? So to increase your heart rate and so on. So macam tu. So it will inhibit your emptying of bladder. Masa tu kena kejar anjing, lapar, tak teringat pun lah nak terkencing ke apa ke, tak ada teringat dah. Okay, right. So masa itu, that is some of the action of the target organ when sympathetic division is activated. But of course, it depends on the situation. What are your situation in that particular moment? But when parasympathetic division is activated, contoh masa tu you baru lepas makan, dah lepas solat, dah kenyang, apa jadi kat kita? Your constrict, parasympathetic division will be activated. It constrict your pupil. So mata pun akan mula mata mula ngantuk, layu, right? And then it stimulate salivary gland. Dah relax, lepas makan, mulalah rasa macam sedapnya kalau ada keropok, kan? So nak mengunyah. Okay? Constrict your bronchi. So mula rasa macam alamak ngantuknya, macam rasa macam nak tidur, slow the heart rate, and then stimulate activity of stomach, so indigestion akan berlaku dan sebagainya. So that is action on target organ related when parasympathetic division is activated. Okay, any question? Any question?
No, madam.
No, faham betul-betul ke tak faham ni? Hakim?
Ya, madam.
Okay, faham ke tak? Any question?
Pasal yang situation tu. So,
Okay.
simpatetik dengan parasympatetik tu dua-dua situasi yang beza kan?
Yes. Maksudnya whatever when they are going to activate it tu depends on your current condition. What condition you are in. So if you are in mobilization of energy, sympathetic lagi dominant compared to parasympathetic. Macam tu. Okay.
Okay, madam.
Okay, right. Lagi soalan? Tak ada. Ada soalan? Okay, so I have task to give you. Okay. Do you have this table in your module?
No.
Oh, tak ada. Okay, so please screenshot this one. So I want you to complete this particular table. Okay. So ini adalah the differences between somatic and autonomic pathway. Okay. And then ini salah ni bawah ni.
Medium ada tapi dia tak complete macam medium punya.
Maybe ada bagi clue sikit-sikit. Sekejap neurotransmitter. Okay, yang bawah ni, yang neurotransmitter ni tinggalkan dulu, buang dulu. Ni salah ni, tersilap ni. Okay, ni salah. Yang bawah neurotransmitter ni buang dulu. So, mana nak you lengkapkan this one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 4 function ni dia ada dua kotak. Okay, but I give you some clue. Somatic is involved in voluntary. What about autonomic? So, you can see. And then I put here autonomic response to external and internal stimulus. What about somatic? So, put it here. Okay. And then the presence of ganglion. Ada atau tak ada? Which one yang ada, which one yang tak ada? Number of neuron in the efferent pathway. So, lengkapkan ni dulu. Okay. Alright. So, we are going to discuss this in the next class. Boleh?
Boleh.
Okay. Alright. So, yang bawah ni, okay, good. Yang bawah ni tinggalkan dulu sebab ni ada pembetulan sikit. Ni silap ni. Okay. Alright. Okay. That's it, I guess, for today. So with that, we are actually finished with our chapter. Okay. Chapter 5. So next class, insyaAllah, we are moving to chapter 6. Alright. Okay. Okay. So any more question?
Madam,
Yes.
untuk chapter 6 tu kita orang kena ambil nota